Are you not even going to say a word to me?
Nope.
Well, you just did.
Dang it.
Listen, I think we got off on the wrong foot, and I don't even have feet.
Well, what do you want? You've broken into my place about 3 times now.
Hey, the third time I was invited.
Not by me.
It was me who did it. Well, okay, fine. I'm not wanted here, I get it. But you should really give Deathtrap Dungeon another chance.
Why? I made 2 videos on it, and I've given very good reasons as to why I don't like the game, and no matter how many times I, in plain English, lay it out, people keep telling me that I'm wrong, as if I'm not allowed to criticize it.
It's a cult classic. It has its fans.
Look, yes, I'm aware that it has fans, okay? And it is based on a classic choose-your-own-adventure book series, but I'm not criticizing the books.
The game is good. Why can't you see that?
Because Look, I see that I'm getting absolutely nowhere, so I'll tell you what. If it will shut you up, I will play it one more time. And I'll even play the most up-to-date version, the PC version on Steam. Would that make you happy?
Yay! Yes, that would make me very happy.
Greetings, my friends. 'Tis I, your host, the Mighty Blue Magus, and welcome back to round 3 of Deathtrap Dungeon. Goody! Before we begin with the PC version of the game, here's my final thoughts on the last time I covered this game, because I got some feedback on it claiming that my copy was just glitched out and broken. I mean, despite what you might think about me, I do take pretty good care of my games, okay? Give me some credit. I can understand some skepticism, but I did check out whether or not Deathtrap Dungeon is compatible with my PS3, and it seems like it is. So I decided to try playing it again on my PlayStation 2, and it worked just fine. So I want to put to rest the theory that my copy was just bugged because I wasn't taking care of it or something. So what does this mean? Am I going to try it yet again on the PlayStation 1? Nope. I think I've made my opinion of the PS1 version pretty clear by now. It's bad, and no amount of comment spams is going to change my mind. If anything, it's gonna make me hate it even more. Despite what you might think about me, I never altered or doctored any footage of anything that I was playing. This game was just a clunky, slow, dark, muddy, and confusing game that I didn't like the first time I played it, and chances are I probably won't like it on my second or third time trying it. So can we all let it go? But I suppose you're wondering about the glitchy footage from the PlayStation 3. Well, as I said before, I did check the compatibility list for this game online, and it seemed fine, at least in the PAL format. So I was under the assumption that it was all good to go. Yeah, but I guess that's my fault for assuming anything ever goes smoothly when I'm trying to record a video nowadays. It's probably just incompatible with my PS3. However, I will still make fun of the game for that, because if it glitches out on my PlayStation 3, then that means there's at least some BIOS formats that makes a Deathtrap Dungeon completely glitch out and become unplayable. Fault of the PS3's emulation, or fault of the game's porting? I'm going with the latter, since very few games are actually incompatible with the PS3, and since it ran Nightmare Creatures, an even older game that works just fine, I'm willing to bet that Deathtrap Dungeon just had some shoddy porting. But now, on to the topic at hand, Deathtrap Dungeon on the PC. So let's dive on into this for hopefully, I pray, the last time. So I boot the game up on Steam, and first things first, the stock sound effects are annoying. These sound effects are all over the game, by the way. They really couldn't just stick somebody in a sound studio for a couple of minutes and record some stock sound effects? I mean, heck, I got a closet over there and a microphone. Give me $10 and I'll give your game a budget. Other than that irritation, the menu setup and presentation so far is a marked improvement over the PS1, and I genuinely mean that. There's more options, it's easier to navigate, and it even loads faster. Hey, not bad, Deathtrap Dungeon. Your menu's alright. Here's the gold star. I'm just gonna check out the controls and... Oh. What even are these controls? The arrow keys for movement, I understand. It was the 90s, so arrow keys were kind of the default. But space is the use item button, enter is jump, and you attack with caps lock. Caps lock?
What is this, a Twitter argument?
I actually tried to play this game with the default controls, and I couldn't. It's so cumbersome and not even remotely worth using. So I changed the keys around to make it more manageable. Now let's see here. Let's make a left click attack and right click for spells, and I can't do that. You're reading this right. It says both attack and cast spell are left click. You're such a picky game. But okay, spell is Q. For quack.
Oh, come on. You're not even giving it a fair chance. You're coming into the game all biased and letting your bad experiences with the fans and the PS1 version negatively impact your critical thinking ability.
No, I'm not. And even if I was, I'm allowed to have grievances with things like sound design and control schemes, aren't I?
But hey, here's some more positives. The game is actually visible. It's not too dark, nor muddy in the slightest, except in areas where it actually impacts the game and requires you to be more vigilant or use magic to light your way. It's a lot more lively than the PS1 version, and the level design is actually really nice looking. I'm being totally serious when I say this. The game looks good, especially for 1998.
Oh, so you're saying the game is good?
I wouldn't go that far.
There's a lot of issues that I found with this game's playstyle, and the more I played it, the more I was having a problem with it. For starters, the controls are still sluggish, and when you have to do anything like platforming, what happens? Instant death. Wonderful. On top of that, combat is stiff as a board, and there's not really any way you can properly defend yourself against more than one enemy at a time. Even the colloidal silver-addicted Jawas who chuck knives are a big threat. Heck, they're actually a bigger threat than the orcs are. I mean, sure, the orcs take more than one hit to die, but these guys move around a lot and have range on you.
It's hard, and at many times, it's unfairly difficult, but I'll get into that in a minute.
Wait. Don't you know that older games are always more difficult than newer ones?
I grew up on Sega Genesis and SNK games. You think I don't know that older games are harder?
It's just an element you have to work with when you go back. No more hand-holding like in modern games.
I'm not asking the game to hold my hand, and people seem to forget this about older games too, but difficulty was a subject of critique, even in older games.
You have to remember that these are video games, and some people play games to relax and have fun for an afternoon. And I think if most people were honest with themselves, they would genuinely say that losing repeatedly at an absurdly difficult game isn't very fun. Especially when the game is working against you with every element of its design, but I'll get to that in a moment. The main thing I didn't like about the PlayStation 1 version is that its controls were slow and sluggish. Well, the PC version still has slow and sluggish controls, so you can't properly defend yourself when enemies are thrown at you left and right, so you die a lot. It also has moments of instant death that will kill you, and you die a lot. Again, I mean, at least it has a moment to show off its top-notch gore effects. I especially like it when your skin gets burned off. Brutal. Upon death, if you didn't save the game, you return to the beginning of the level. On one hand, it does give the save points more value instead of being virtually useless like they were in the PS1 version. But on the other hand, this game repeatedly throws things at you that specifically require you to have died at least once to know what's coming next. Take this spot in level 1 for starters. You have to take a running leap to get to this treasure chest, but if you open it from this side you land on, you are immediately killed by this swinging iron ball. Or especially this moment here. After you get the gold key from this room, you hop down to go to the door, only to be met by a robot that can kill you almost instantly with a flamethrower. The only way to be properly prepared for that robot is to have a spell ready, but here's the problem. Casting spells is also really inconvenient. You see, you can't just press the cast spell button to throw a fireball at a robot. There are steps you gotta take first. You press F1 for melee weapons, F2 for ranged weapons, and F3 for magic spells. None of these are listed in the options in the control scheme, by the way, and you actually can't change them, so you're stuck with F1, F2, and F3 no matter what you do. But okay, so I know the robot's coming and I know how to put a spell together. Okay, so I press F3, I have to press 3 to ready the fireball spell, as it's allocated automatically to my inventory layout, which doesn't cast the spell either. Pressing 3 just readies the spell. Now you can press Q and use it. Yes! Another one?
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Hey, let's spawn 2 enemies that you haven't seen this entire time during the entire level that can kill you almost instantly back to back. Just randomly, too. Thanks.
Hey, trial and error is always part of a game, isn't it?
Yes, trial and error is always a big part of a game, especially more difficult games. But if you are literally spawning enemies out of the blue for the sole purpose of getting cheap deaths, that's not trial and error, that is punishment for playing the game properly.
You know, I don't mind games being hard, and I'm actually okay with dying occasionally or even all the time, but when your entire game is built around inconveniencing the player just to make them die more often, as an artificial way to increase both difficulty and playtime, then you're not making a very enjoyable game. You're only supposed to have elements in a video game that make it more fun. If it takes away from the enjoyment of the adventure, then it has no place here. And if your game is only about making the player miserable, then this is bad. I mean, can you imagine if the controls were a bit tighter, a bit faster, the combat was improved a ton to be more fluid and fast-paced, but still had the same level design? Exploring would be fun, and you would have a good chance at defending yourself against enemies who could put up a challenging fight, but as long as you're enjoying the combat and controls, then you don't mind dying.
Because you're having fun.
Well, that's not fair. You're only calling it an inconvenience because you refuse to get good at it. Maybe if you put the time and effort into mastering the game, you'd find yourself having a real good time.
You know, it's funny you bring that up. Hey guys, I did an earlier episode of Magus Reviews on a game called Chakan the Forever Man. It's a notoriously difficult dark fantasy game that relies exclusively upon player reflexes and trial and error to proceed through the game. I couldn't beat it, because it's hard. But I liked it!
Yes, Chakan is relentlessly difficult and punishes you by sending you back to the starting point of the level if you die, just like Deathtrap Dungeon does. But Chakan also has controls that complement a player with fast reflexes, and doesn't just throw stuff at them for the express purpose of killing them. That game also has a lot of trial and error, but it's never trial and error done because it's constantly making itself more difficult to play. If you die, it's your fault, not the game's.
Oh, so now you're blaming the game because you suck at it.
Well, yeah, I am. This might come as a shock to you, but sometimes you can do that.
If I have to master a game's awful control scheme or playstyle for me to be able to critique it, then hey, anyone who has ever played Superman 64, Bubsy 3D, Sonic 06, and Shaq Fu, unless you are absolutely amazing at it, you don't get to have an opinion.
Bit of a hyperbolic comparison, don't you think?
Is it? Is it really, though?
I've heard this time and time and time again from people who are dead set on the get good mentality. I understand that video games are often challenging, and I like that some games are challenging as well, but you shouldn't have to slog through hours upon hours of grinding at a game that you hate and aren't having any fun with just so you can be good enough to tell other people that it sucks. And hey, while we're on the topic of sucking, I haven't talked enough crap about the combat yet, have I? You can't just press the attack button strategically, no. You have to hold down a directional button, and then by hitting the attack button do you start to attack. Also, whatever button you were holding down determines what way you'll be attacking. So, I know what you're thinking. Hey, that's kind of cool, having to pick and choose which way to attack with your sword sounds like it would work. Well, it would in theory, but honestly, the only useful attack is the lunge combo you can do because it's the only attack with any range and has a fast startup time. And you're gonna want to attack fast and go back to defense afterwards. Every fight looks something like this. Go into defense position, wait, lunge attack, and hopefully you hit before they do. Oh, yeah, and it gets even worse, too, because despite the difficulty of the game, when you're in a straight-up melee fight with enemies, they're not really hard, but they're kinda sort of imaginary hard. Unless they're absolutely ganging up on you, 2 to 3 on 1 or so, then most of the time, they're actually really, really easy. Take these snake women for starters. They take a lot of damage from your standard sword, but die fairly quickly to the venom sword. How the standard sword and the venom sword work are exactly identical. There is no strategic difference. You just block and lunge, but the venom sword just kills the snake women faster. That's not really strategy, it just takes more hits to kill them with the regular sword. I'm pretty sure Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest was criticized for the same problem.
They probably heard that people thought Castlevania 1 was too difficult, so they toned it down to give the player avatar strengths, leveling up the player's avatar while still maintaining the basic level of difficulty throughout. It wasn't hard in the traditional sense, it was only imaginary hard, because enemies took more hits if you didn't have the best whip, and dispatching more resilient enemies wasn't really a challenge, it just took longer.
I'm just saying. That's a problem people have with Castlevania 2. It's the same problem here. But at least Castlevania 2 has a good control scheme.
There's also no way to lock onto an enemy either, like in Ocarina of Time, so you better hope that you're not off the mark or BAM! 15 hit points gone. Now, in fairness, the enemies don't have small hitboxes and are fairly lenient on how and where you hit them. But if I may, however, propose something. Since the game is fairly combat heavy, then maybe a control scheme that favors swordplay would be in the best interest of the game? Maybe like Xena Warrior Princess. That game had an awesome combat system, and I bet with some tweaking it would have worked pretty well here too. And that game came out a year before Deathtrap Dungeon. But since I'm mentioning stuff like Nightmare Creatures and Xena as a way to show, hey, I've actually played other games, this just got my gears turning.
And I know I'm going to get flack for this, and at this point in time, I've gotten enough flack for Deathtrap Dungeon that I'm kind of apathetic at this point, okay? I couldn't beat this game because every time I tried to sit myself down and keep playing it, to slog through, to see the next portion of the game, every single argument that I made for progression was just met with my common sense going, play something better.
I was honestly planning on playing this game through to completion just to show you all how much I tried, and I was hoping to have a good time with it. But I couldn't. I threw in the towel yet again. Unlike me throwing in the towel for Chikan, where I acknowledge that it's the difficulty that's holding me back from completing a great game, this is just a game I can't beat because it's bad.
And that's really about it, actually. It is better than the PS1 version just simply because the level design is a lot better and it is a brighter looking game, so I can at least see what's going on. And I kind of like the idea of a character being trapped inside of a dungeon that you have to navigate through trial and error for vast riches, wealth, and just overall having fun. I love loot fests like this, actually. But the controls are ultimately what made me say, nope, I can't do it anymore. I simply can't. And I'm sorry, it needs to be said, but the control scheme is terrible. There's no way around it. No amount of altering the button layout is going to fix an ultimately broken game. If it had a better control scheme and it had better combat, this would have been a great game. But unfortunately, it's not. At least in my opinion.
I'm not trying to be a contrarian here. I'm not trying to tell people that you should hate this game. At best, I expect some of you who watch this video to at least acknowledge that there are some flaws here, and maybe you could acknowledge that some people wouldn't like it, but others might. This game wanted to be Tomb Raider with swords and magic, but the guys who made the game never made a sequel. In fact, they never made any other games again. Shouldn't that tell you something? Hey, look at some of the Steam reviews too. I'm not the only guy who disliked this game, but I find myself repeatedly defending my disliking of it. If you enjoy it, that's fine, or if you're genuinely curious to play it for yourself, I'm not going to stop you, and I would recommend the PC version on Steam over the PS1 version any day of the week.
So that's it, huh?
Yep. That's it. Your game still sucks, bro. That's my stance, and I'm sticking to it.
You're really not budging on this, are you?
Nope.
But, it's a cult classic. People love it.
Well, not everyone loves it, and there's a thing about cult anything. It's that a very, very tight-knit group of people actually enjoy something, whereas other people just don't get it. And that's okay. They're allowed to have these sort of enjoyments that are kind of niche, but it's cult for a reason. Not everyone's gonna dig it.
So what are you gonna tell the people who grew up loving this game? That they're wrong?
I feel like I shouldn't be saying everything is good or everything is bad just because that's what the general public wants me to say. I'll pick and choose what I like, and when I like it. If I don't like it, I don't like it. And I don't feel like they should always agree with me, and I feel like I shouldn't always have to agree with them either. Look, I'm here to talk about nostalgic things with a modern sensibility so we can kind of either look back and laugh or look back and go, good times, okay? And I'm by no means a professional reviewer. I mean, have you seen what's over in the corner right now?
Why won't somebody call the cops? So what's your end game here?
I'm hoping that they'll look at my video and say, okay, he's got a point. I still like it, but it does have some demonstrable flaws, and I can see that could be off-putting to some people.
You know, that's fair.
Really?
Yeah, I get it.
Finally, jeez.
Maybe Deathtrap Dungeon isn't that great of a game after all, and I shouldn't be breaking into people's homes trying to murder them over it.
Yeah, the only guy who can do that is Segata Sanshiro.
But I must go now. Take care, Blue Magus.
You as well.
And you, my hospital skull friend, Reaper Zero. This episode is really preachy. And even you, Miss... Do you even have a name? What?
Oh, she said her name was Cultist.
Cultist?
Cultist. With a Q. For quack.
I'm a head out. What are you laughing at?
He said, I'm a head out. He's a flying skull.
Oh. No, seriously, this episode was really preachy.
I'm going back to the comedy stuff next time.
Oh, okay, good.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching, and I'd like to personally thank all my supporters over on at patreon.com. Cyrings, who also does the intro for the show, might I add. Rourke Tenjuin, I hope I pronounced that right. Zakari, who also does videos on YouTube, if I might add. If you want to see a shout out, go support me on over there. And I also wanted to add that I'm working on a ton of different videos right now, since I have a lot of free time. And I know it's a little bit scary out there, but right now I'll do my best to make you laugh and entertain you. But I do want to thank you all for dropping by, and let me know what you see me talk about next on my goofy little show with a edgy skull boy and a duck woman. Q for quack.